This week on the Build Your Empire podcast, we go behind the scenes of a real-world cyber crisis with one of the sharpest minds in security. Zachary Lewis, CIO, CISO, and author of Locked Up, shares the true story of facing down the LockBit ransomware group and what it taught him about leadership, resilience, and the future of cybersecurity. Don't miss it right after this short video. Empires aren't built in a day. They're crafted stone by stone, forged by those willing to endure the tests of time. From the great philosophers of old to the dreamers and builders of today, the path to greatness is a journey paved with discipline, vision, and resilience. Those who seek to build their empire must learn to conquer not just their surroundings, but themselves. Welcome to the Build Your Empire podcast. Here we explore the stories behind the struggle, the wisdom behind the grind, and the victories that define the empires of our time. Because behind every empire, there's a story. What are you building? Build your empire. Today's guest is Zachary Lewis, a seasoned IT and cybersecurity executive whose leadership has fortified a private higher education institution against some of the most advanced threats of our time. As both CIO and CISO, Zach has led transformative technology initiatives, optimized multi-million-dollar budgets, and chaired the Enterprise Risk Management Committee, aligning innovation with institutional growth and resilience. He's a three-time recipient of Cyber Defense Magazine's Top Global CISO Award, the St. Louis Nonprofit CISO of the Year, and a recent graduate of the FBI CISO Academy. His upcoming book, Locked Up, Cybersecurity Threat Mitigation Lessons from a Real-World LockBit Ransomware Response, published by Wiley, delivers hard-earned insights from a major ransom incident every leader can learn from. From the boardroom to the front lines of cyber defense, Zach brings a mission-driven approach to leadership and resilience. And today, he joins us to share how to stay one step ahead in the age of AI and evolving digital threats. Zach, welcome to the Build Your Empire podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Nick, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for giving me the invite.
Yeah, I'm glad we met. Glad we met last week. And I read through the book, or the beginning of the book. Looking forward to our conversation here today. So let's get started. Just maybe tell the audience, where you're from, if you're originally from Missouri, and where you grew up.
Yeah, so right now I live right outside St. Louis, kind of in the High Ridge, House Springs area on a little homestead out here. But growing up, I was actually from the Southern Illinois and sort of Western Kentucky area, Paducah, Kentucky, Metropolis, Illinois, down in that area, a little small town down there. Grew up deep out in the country, and then eventually moved up here for university at SIU Edwardsville, and then found jobs in St. Louis because, well, there's not really anything back home. So kind of stayed in the city and has popped around since then.
What were your first steps into technology?
I think my biggest step probably forward happened in high school. There were some courses I didn't want to take as a sophomore, and the school said, "Hey, we can put you in a senior level, almost IT course where you kind of build computers and troubleshoot computers." And I'd had a desktop for a few years at that point at the house, and I was like, "Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do that." So they put me in there, and I was one of the only non-seniors in there, and the seniors all kind of had senioritis already. So the teacher sort of leaned on me to do most of the work of building things and testing things, and it's kind of just, I guess, a little passion for technology, and that kept me going through college into the workforce.
So when did cybersecurity become your main focus? Was that in college or post-college?
No, man, cybersecurity used to not even be on my radar at all. I mean, coming up through college, I always just thought, systems administration, maybe some network stuff, but I just like kind of tooling and fixing computers. Didn't really think too much past help desk and some servers. Securities came up probably around 2018 or so. I started having to weave that into a lot of what we were doing at the university, at least a basic standpoint of securing systems. But when I moved to the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in 2020, that's kind of where it really took off, just because they didn't have a security program at the time, a very skeletal force at best. So I just kind of started fleshing that out, learning everything I could to sort of build a program, build a team, and implement those things that I was learning along the way.
So you built that team from scratch then?
Yeah.
And a lot of the processes and things like that when you walked in?
Yeah, all the processes, policies, the team, I mean, essentially everything.
So is that probably the big break in your career?
I mean, I think it definitely helped. I actually, the biggest break, is probably getting the title of CISO helps more than anything. It opens a lot of doors. It starts introducing you to people. And I mean, my team's not big. I mean, I manage IT and security in the library. So collectively I have a large team, but if you're looking at individual units, it's not very large. But, when you have the title and then you can go and you can speak about things and you can show like you're actually building stuff that works. Maybe the team wins some awards, maybe the program wins some awards, gets some recognition. It starts to generate a lot of forward momentum.
I mean, you wear both hats, the CIO and CISO. How do you separate the business side from the security side? Because in most places, most companies, most universities, that's a separate role.
Yeah, I mean, in most cases, I think it probably makes sense to be a separate role. But for us being small enough, it sort of works. I think at the end of the day, it's usually it's all about the business. You want the business to function, but you want it to function securely. So you try to find places where you can interweave security in without it disrupting, day-to-day functionality too much. What's been nice about it being under, one person, managing both is, there's less fighting for budget. There's less arguing what it's going to be. I've woven in that security with the team, so they know that when we're implementing a new application or a new technology or something, we need it to be secure. So that's just kind of the groundwork, and then it's winning hearts and minds of the people throughout the university after that.
What's your day-to-day like as both a CIO and CISO?
Yeah, a lot of meetings. I think that's pretty standard for anyone with one of these titles. We sit in a lot of meetings, do a lot of high-level planning. I work on policies, processes. I chair our enterprise risk management committee. So we're always looking at risks. There's a lot of stuff popping in higher education right now from different government regulations and grant funding and government funding and how financial aid works. So we're really trying to navigate that space right now. I think a lot of higher education institutions are doing the same. But we always have projects going, so it's checking in on projects, lending a hand. I'm still a very hands-on technical leader, so I do have to get my hands dirty every now and then and jump in on a project. But well and all, the team manages itself pretty easily. I kind of let them do what they need to do. I hired them to do a job, so go out there and do it without my too much of my oversight or micromanagement. But everyone functions as a pretty cohesive unit at the moment.
We talked about this a little bit last week, but I guess the sensitivity of data. But what makes higher education a unique challenge when it comes to cybersecurity? Is it the sensitivity of the data with you've got students, and then I guess you have a lot of research data and things like that?
Yeah, student data definitely. So you're going to have a lot of turnover of students as they graduate out and a new class comes in. So you're getting a few hundred new records every year. That data is kept, almost in perpetuity because of certain regulations. So you're talking tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of students over 150 plus years. Now, not all of those are viable anymore because we've been around for a long time, but it's still stuff you have to protect. Students or younger people, so to speak, have more valuable PII, personal identifiable information, social security numbers and things that can be used by the threat actors to sort of steal identities and open accounts and credit cards and different stuff like that. So pretty sought after there. You mentioned research data. Yes, absolutely. Research data. We're constantly working on vaccines and medicines and different sorts of trials of drugs and whatever that might be. We work very closely with a couple other research institutions in the area. So you want to make sure that proprietary data is secure, that intellectual property is secure. Additionally, you got your faculty, you got your staff, some normal employee stuff, but higher ed and education in general, I think, has probably a funding problem. It's always tight, right? So
Sure.
You have limited resources to secure a lot of sensitive information. The threat actors know that. So they try to target these institutions as easy pickings because they don't have a lot of robust security, they don't have big teams, and they can kind of slip in and steal that data.
Have you incorporated human risk management into your cybersecurity program for faculty, for students?
We're starting to build that program out more and more. Primarily what we do right now, we have students who come in from all over the world. So we do a little checking of, we have some insider risk management stuff. We have a couple new platforms we're using from a design partnership standpoint, where we're testing new stuff to see user behavior analytics, what things are getting accessed, where data's flowing, what people are accessing. We got a lot of alerting and stuff on. And then from a more of a broad social engineering level, we do the normal phishing type tests and stuff that a lot of people do. I don't necessarily think those are super effective, but we have taken lately to using third parties to come in and sort of socially engineer their way into departments to get to data. Can they reroute, routing numbers? Can they get a download of students' grades and academic records? Can they, I don't know, just talk to different departments and get them to reset passwords or MFA prompts. So we've been testing different departments individually, and then getting a write-up and going back to those departments and talking about, hey, what worked, what didn't work. We even had people come physically on campus and do a physical pen test where they dressed as students and they came in and it's like, oh, hey, are these people going to open the door to the dorm rooms? And now you have, strangers wandering around up there. And how far niceties can get you, right? So we're trying a bunch of different levels to see sort of what sticks in that area. And there's kind of adapting from there.
So what's the one change that you made at the university that's made the biggest impact on cybersecurity?
It's made the biggest impact. That's a great question. Probably our data classification and categorization project. So, I think a lot of organizations are probably going through a similar journey right now. But we have, millions and millions of files. You're talking hundreds of terabytes, and trying to take all that and classify it based on, what's in it, how sensitive it is. And then once you have that sort of tagged and labeled, what happens then? It's great, it's labeled, but if you don't do anything with that, then it's kind of pointless. So now we're in that process of, all right, we have these things labeled restricted, confidential, internal, public. Do I want people to be able to download, restricted data on a home computer, on a mobile device? No, I don't. All right, let's put some rules in on that. Let's educate them about what is allowed and what isn't allowed. And then enforce it with technology, not just with a policy. So we're kind of going through that process right now. I think that's probably the biggest change, I guess, but probably very important.
Thank you for sharing that. That's insightful. If another university leader asked you for a piece of advice, what would you tell them? What would you share with them?
A piece of advice. I'll kind of go back to how I manage my team is, I hire people to do a job and I let them do that job without micromanaging it. That's usually a good one I go to. Also, we're higher ed. So when there's a crisis, we can normally say, hey, it's okay. Take a deep breath. No one's dying. It is higher ed. So if you think you have a crisis, I'm sure it can wait a little bit while someone gets to it. Just hang in there. We'll get to it. It'll be all right. This isn't end of the world. High stakes we're running here. So I try to keep people calm, let people do their job. I think are probably a couple of the best pieces I could give.
Thank you for that. So now we talked about crisis. Let's move into the book. Okay. And I started reading a little bit of the book here the last couple of days. Thanks for sending that. Take us back to the day it happened and when you realized something was wrong, because it seemed like originally when I started reading it that you're kind of, is this just, some random alert or whatever? And then I guess as you uncovered it, you noticed how serious it was.
Yeah. So, no matter how robust, I guess, your security program can be, we're all fallible, right? There's always a 0 day, a misconfig, something you miss, right? So for us, back in 2023, we had missed something, and a threat actor managed to get in LockBit specifically, which is why the book is called Locked Up. And then LockBit managed to get in, and they tried to exfiltrate some data, and then they also set off ransomware to sort of encrypt some of our servers, which was interesting at the time because we thought it was a technical problem. A lot of our hardware was kind of going end of life. So when things were inaccessible, we sort of thought, oh man, when they say end of life, they really mean end of life. This thing's sort of over. But as we dug into some remediation steps, disaster recovery steps, we sort of found that wasn't the case actually. And we had intruders. So from there, activating incident response and working that and working with some outside partners and some law enforcement to get things back on track, really.
Okay. This law enforcement is at the FBI?
FBI and CISA were involved in that, but mostly CISA there for resources if needed, and FBI to sort of gather evidence and indicators of compromise that they could use in actually building a case. Because it was less than a year later when they actually went and took down LockBit's main site and indicted a couple of the creators and managed to do a couple of arrests of some of the developers. So while I don't think we directly gave them everything they needed to make that arrest happen, and we were definitely part of the evidential piece that they were building a case for. So
sounded like they had a pretty unique business model, because I read that they basically built the SaaS that they made available to other criminals, and I guess monetized it and then got a commission off of everybody else's work, right?
Yeah, so LockBit was the most prolific ransomware group in 22 and 23. And they built a ransomware as a service sort of model where they would build the tools to compromise people. They would sell those tools to really anyone who wanted to buy them with instructions, support. If you had problems with it, you could call in or chat in and they would walk you through how to use their tool to compromise organizations and businesses. And it was a pretty robust service. Yeah, I mean, they were all over the place, changing how ransomware threat actor groups operated, and we've seen that sort of reflected in groups that have come after them.
That's pretty unique. That's the first time I've heard something about them, the criminals having support and then offering their application in a SaaS model. I mean, yeah, not a lot of these ransomware groups and hacker groups anymore operate just like a business. You come in, you essentially clock in, and you work all day at trying to breach a company. And when you do, the team gets together and there's a celebration, and they can get health benefits. They have insurance. They have a building, like an entire office building they go to, and the cubicles with computers, and they operate just like a normal business that you or I would go into. It's pretty crazy. Wow. I don't think you saw the movie Beekeeper.
Yeah. So, like the Beekeeper.
Yeah, it makes me think of that movie. But they have their own building.
Working on phones, computers, and everything. Yeah.
What surprised you most during the response and when you started uncovering this? Because it's like an onion, right? You start peeling and you start looking at different things, and it's like, oh, well, there's another layer. There's another layer.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's big for us is in late in 2022, so this was right before the ransomware happened, we had actually ran a ransomware tabletop with our leadership team, and going through what we thought was a pretty robust covering. We had a third party come in. They talked to us a little bit about what could happen. We stepped through a ransomware incident. Hey, this is how we respond. This is what we activate. This is what we do. We were feeling pretty good about that. But it's funny when you do those in a low stakes environment, and then when it actually happens, you get into it and you activate the same resources and you start working through it, and things change very quickly. A plan doesn't last through what first contact with the enemy, I think is somewhat how the saying goes. So once you're actually in there and you're dealing with it, you're finding oh, this actually doesn't work quite like that, or actually I can't get into this system that I thought we could when we walked through the tabletop, or oh man, we didn't plan for this at all. So there were several things that we learned along the way. I outline a handful of those in the book, but we definitely had to change our incident response plan after the fact. And I think we just learned a lot of information, and we didn't have a mass amount of loss. There was no hundreds or even thousands of files that were sort of taken or anything. So we got off very easily. And I like to think for if you're going to get a trial by fire with ransomware, this was probably about as light touch as it gets that you learn a whole lot about.
How did you stay calm, and how did you keep everybody else calm? Because this is a surprise, right? Sure. And it's certainly kind of shocking. But how were you able to keep calm and keep everybody else calm involved?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the day I found the ransom note, and you're going to get a sense of dread, right? No one wants to see that. Oh man, that's not good. And I stay very up on the news. I read a lot of stuff. So I read about, when ransomware shows up, that a lot of the times the CISO, gets fired. And it's like, oh, guys, I'm calling people trying to activate resources. I tell a story that the first day I called cyber insurance. Hey, we had ransomware. I need some help. And then I called the FBI. Hey, we had a ransomware attack. I need some help. And then my third call, I picked up and called my wife and I said, hey, we had a ransomware attack. I'm going to be a little late tonight. This might be a resume generating event. So we'll see kind of how things play out here. I was concerned, but on the outside, I didn't want that concern to show. So it was a lot of keeping calm. And I'm typically pretty stoic for the most part with my outward reactions to things. So the team, a lot of people didn't even know anything had happened. We kept it pretty tight-lipped in terms of who needed to know with leadership team, with board members, with the IT team, until we had a real good handle on what was going on, which I think was important at the time, at least in the early stages while we gathered information. But then when it came out, just having a plan that people knew, like, hey, we got this under control. These are the steps we're going to take. This is what we're looking for. This is how we're going to recover, and it's going to be okay. And not, running around with your hair on fire and freaking out, but just giving everyone a very laid out, calm plan of what they need to do to make a successful recovery, I think is very important.
You're listening to the Build Your Empire podcast. We'll be right back after this short break. This week's Stoic Quote is brought to you by Czar Clothing, the most sustainable athleisure wear for men and women. Build your empire with style and purpose. Build your empire with Czar Clothing. Visit czarclothing.com and use the code ZAR25 for 15% off your cart. Empire Builders, it's time for our Stoic Quote segment for episode 7 with Zach Lewis. Fire tests gold. Adversity tests the brave. Seneca. When ransomware strikes, panic is the easy reaction. But true strength is measured in how we think under fire. My guest today, Zach Lewis, faced LockBit head-on, navigating chaos with clarity, transforming crisis into a masterclass in resilience. Because in cybersecurity, as in life, it's not the attack that defines you, it's how you respond. And now, back to the conversation, right here on the Build Your Empire podcast. Having a plan in place and then going through the plan that works. And it's great that you use some stoicism to keep calm. I do the same. I do the same when I get a lot of challenges. You said there was just you weren't damaged much. There was a small amount of data that was lost. How were you able to cut that off at the pass?
Yeah, I think a lot of our security sort of implementations help with that, with whether it was detection or shutting down of data transfer. There was also some happenstance in there where some equipment sort of got disrupted by the ransomware that also helped sever some ties. So there were several points that I think just sort of came together and worked. You don't always want to, land on happenstance, but sometimes it works in your favor. And we had some other things in place that helped with that. But once that data was sort of leaked, it was a matter of figuring out what it was, how much it was, what was in it, which also later spun off this data classification and categorization project I talked about earlier. But we didn't want to be in a situation again in the future where we didn't know necessarily what was in every single file. And now we would, if that ever happened again. Knock on wood, it doesn't. But if data was ever lost, I would be able to be like, well, that's a restricted file. So we know it's got to have this sensitive type of information in it. We might not know specifically what person, but we would know that it's very important, right? Whereas before in this ransomware incident, it was kind of like, well, all right, there's a couple gigs out there. What do you think that could be? How many files is that? Maybe that's 20,000 files or something. And it's like, okay, maybe it's less than that. I don't know. It depends on the size of the file, but what's in all those? And we didn't have anything to really scan through that to identify what type of data or information was in it. So that's stressful in itself. But a lot of stuff came together to keep that from being too large of a data drop, and we were able to recover pretty quickly.
So I have two questions. They're related. If you can't divulge this information, that's fine. Keep it confidential. But were you able to find the entry point, number one? And number two, were you able to understand how long they were in your environment? Because my understanding is that it's typically months, 6 months, maybe longer, because they sit, kind of wait, and just kind of check things out and see how check behavior. Were you able to identify the entry point, and then how long do you think they were in?
Yeah, so we were we had it was a combination effort of a misconfiguration and a compromised credential. Both things just sort of came together, and I mentioned happenstance in my last answer, but happenstance in this case for the threat actor, where just two pieces just happened to align in a time where we were going through a lot of change, hardware changes, configuration changes. One thing gets missed, they managed to compromise one person, and bam, they sort of can kind of come in. So we were able to patch that up pretty quickly. We saw the entry point, we saw how the credentials got compromised, and we're able to patch that up within a few days after finding out the ransom had happened, the attackers had attacked. They were in our environment a little under 2 weeks before they were moving things around, accessing resources, and based on the account they had, it actually had not like admin level permissions, but it had some permissions to get to some of these resources they were bouncing around to. So it didn't set off any alarms, but when we started seeing data start moving out in a weird way, that sort of triggered it. But I guess they needed a few days to poke around and kind of, plant their malware, figure out where they want to go, where everything lives, and disrupt some other stuff too. Maybe where our backups were, if they wanted to disrupt those, which one of our backup sets were kind of interrupted during that process, and a handful of other things, just kind of mapping out our network before we were able to really hone in on it.
Was the configuration a human error? Because I know most of the time it's a human error with a misconfigured environment.
I would say yes and no. So we were going through a bunch of hardware changes where we had configs on an old system. Those configs got migrated to a new system. That new system had problems, and we had to migrate to a third system, all in a pretty rapid succession. And somewhere in that migration, that the migration of settings was automatic, but the checking and the inputting, I guess, of configs were the human part. But one of those didn't transfer appropriately, was missed, and then no one caught it. So a little bit both of machine moving, but a human not verifying on the config changes is what really caused it.
So it was on premise, because you had mentioned some older hardware. So it was on premise environment?
Yeah, this was at the very tail. So we are very, at least now, have finished our sort of cloud journey. So we're a very cloud first, SaaS first university. And this was on the tail end of that journey where we were finally moving the last handful of our servers out to the cloud. We've SaaSed almost every application we have in our environment, which I will say was primarily the main driving reason. We did not have to close. We did not have to shut down classes or anything. So when the ransomware hit, we were disrupted. It only disrupted the last remaining things we had on premise, which ended up being the most low tier, things that we needed to move. So for them and old stuff, so old file shares, old data repositories, old systems that we were working to shut down and migrate out, and migrate their servers out, but shut down like old systems and stuff. So when it hit, though, our SaaS environment wasn't affected. So our learning management system is SaaS based. Our student information system is SaaS based. We have Intra ID for identification, Microsoft stuff. So the students and faculty and staff were able to continue doing their jobs. There was no interruption. There was no downtime. And they were doing business as usual. They had no idea this was even going on in the back end. So, I'm back here sweating bullets. And they're teaching and learning as normal, which I guess is about best case that you could ask for in that environment, in that situation. But that being SaaS-based probably saved us a lot of problems.
So you were able to kind of cordon off the environment and then kind of restrain what they could do?
The threat actors weren't able to get to our cloud, any of our cloud environment, which is great. We definitely had a server environment out there that could talk to our on-prem environment. They never managed to get out there. And as soon as we saw weird stuff going on, those were kind of cut from each other. And then when we brought incident responders in, them and us were both digging through everything from the cloud environment, running scans to make sure that nothing out there was compromised, accessed, any little pieces left anywhere, but it was completely segmented and secured. So that was able to function. And so we from backups, after scanning through those, finding out when the threat actor came in, finding a restore point, we were able to just restore that stuff out sort of to the cloud, and get those back-end systems working that only affected a couple individuals.
Very intriguing story. The whole how it developed And obviously it wasn't a career ending decision for you, which it could be a resume event, right? Some of these big breaches.
Sure. And that's unfortunate. I think a little of that is starting to change. And I mean, I hope so. We see ransomware incidents and cyber attacks increasing year over year. So, what we're doing in the industry isn't necessarily working. And every time you have probably an inevitable cyber attack at this point, or ransomware incident at this point, firing your CISO might not be the best idea. He might be one of the most knowledgeable people about your environment. So don't get rid of your golden goose, I guess, so to speak, in that instance. But I mean, a lot of these guys, it's interesting. Ransomware hits these big companies and their share price takes a dip, but it's a dip for like a day or two, and then it rebounds like no problem. I think people are getting very desensitized to these attacks. They get their letters in the mail about their identity protection because their identities were stolen, or PII was stolen, or social security numbers were stolen, or something like that. And they're like, oh, okay, I get another year of credit monitoring. What else is new? And these companies aren't suffering. I even think about when the two big casinos were hit out in Vegas a couple years ago, at the same time. One of them paid a ransom, one of them did not, and recovered on their own. But they both took, a massive hit, because one was down for a couple weeks as they tried to recover, and the other one paid a massive ransom to get their data unencrypted and get functioning again. Both of those saw a share price decrease. They both rebounded, or share price. Not they don't trade publicly. Revenues took a hit that month or whatever. But I remember reading at the end of the quarter, they weren't down really any, like pennies on what their normal revenues would be, on a quarterly basis. By the end of the year, they were still, making revenue and very successful. So, I mean, it was, just a rounding error essentially on their revenues for the year and their profits for the year. So no big deal. And it didn't matter which way you recovered, whether you did it yourself or you paid the ransom. So.
Well, if the stock market, oftentimes there's an overreaction. I think the other thing is a lot of people outside of cybersecurity don't realize that people are going to get in, right? It's just, can you, right? Because they're going to get into your environment. It's just, can you cut them off at the pass? Can you contain it? Right. And I think that's what people think. It's just some, unique event where they're able to enter, but people are always entering. It's just, you can cut them off. And, there's a lot of people that are already in your environment, and, plus they sit oftentimes in the environment. It sounds like yours developed pretty quick. But a lot of times they'll sit in the environment for 3, 4, 5, 6 months, right? And just collect data and see how things work before they jump on the attack.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the worst places for it to happen right now, though, is probably in the healthcare sector, like hospitals and stuff. It's very disruptive. We've seen that even with like Change Healthcare, for instance, and just how long they were down and how much interruption happened from that, spanning out to different hospitals, different healthcare industries, different doctors' offices. I mean, it touched so many things, and that's really disruptive when it starts, endangering sort of people's lives, people's medical needs and healthcare, and just their well-being in general. That's no good. Higher ed is one thing. Manufacturing, getting a product, that's one thing. But when we start like jumping in and messing with people's health and medical outcomes, that's no good. Right.
I mean, and things like electricity, airlines. I mean, it's a combination. It's not very good. Luckily yours wasn't, too critical, and I think people weren't depending on, an airplane landing or something like that. What motivated you to write the book? Was it just to tell the story, maybe to help others and help them understand, to create a process, and put a process in place?
Yeah, I mean, a little of all of those, right? So there wasn't really a book sort of like this. Number one, that I could find in any of my research, and I know the publisher was very excited too, because they didn't know of one either. There's some books out there that talk about different high profile breaches that have occurred, or cyber attacks that have occurred, but nothing that really walks a user through it. And so my big thing is that in the industry, whenever you have a ransomware attack, a data breach, a cyber attack, whatever it may be, it's usually kept pretty low key. You don't want to tell a lot of people. It's sort of a mark of shame. And everyone going to sweep that under the rug and keep it quiet. Well, the threat actors, when they breach and attack someone, they're sharing it on the back end with other people after they've gotten their piece. They're like, oh yeah, we hit this place, we've hit this place. It's very publicized for them. And they're sharing information on what worked and what doesn't work. So if we want to get better at protecting each other, I think we need to be a little bit more open and sharing of that. So, I wanted to put this story in there from, everything that happened before. Hey, I made a mistake. I'm human. This is where we, left some stuff open and how people got in. Here's what happened in the middle. Here's everything that you should know. I mean, your incident's going to be a little bit different than ours. They all are, but here are some key things we missed. Maybe you won't miss those when it happens for you. Maybe this is something you can build into your incident response plan in advance and something to think about and plan for. That caught us off guard. And then afterwards, here's how we plugged everything. Here's what we implemented afterwards, and here's what we've changed. Putting all that together, hopefully, there's some helpful advice in there, some guidance for some people that makes things a little bit easier for them if they run into this sort of situation.
Who's the book targeted for? CISO, cybersecurity community, executives, or all the above?
Yeah, so I wrote it. I mean, primarily the people implementing it and getting some real value, I think, are going to be a lot of the cybersecurity community. I wrote it in a way that is not overly technical. I'm not using a lot of big technical terms. And anytime I do, I try to really define what those are in layman terms so those executives can read it. And I think as a tertiary group, the higher education in general, because it is from a higher ed perspective and we're a very targeted group. So maybe some other higher ed leadership teams or people working cyber there, even some board level members might read it and take something back to protect their institutions as well. So I think we have 3 tiers of viable people who will probably find some value in it.
Yeah, certainly the cybersecurity community, but I could definitely see the executive suite and the board of directors, right? Because like you said, about the stock could take a hit, could be damaging to the company, the brand, and especially, depending on the industry, it could cause some lives and then liability.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So I think the executive suite should definitely get the book and be aware, because this can happen to anybody, right? Not just university.
Yeah, and that's a key point, I think, Nick, is that it can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter that the book was written, from an higher ed standpoint. The ransomware here could be ransomware at a manufacturing plant or a retail store or, whatever, but ransomware sort of does the same thing. You know what your sensitive data is, so, replace, student PII or student grades with, top secret manufacturing plant data or product data that you want to secure, that same principle sort of thing there. And some of our use cases of things we found that messed up or what worked or some gotchas along the way. I mean, you can still take those and put them into your plans and practice them at your tabletops. They'll still be viable even though they're in a higher ed setting.
What's the one lesson that you hope the readers walk away with? Is it having a process in place and sticking to the plan and then slightly making adjustments? Is that what you like people to walk away with, or what do you think is the help?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely you want to have a plan. It should be a practice plan, and a good incident response plan, a good disaster recovery plan, probably working in tandem. Try them out, run through a tabletop. You want to have practice. You want to know where your sensitive data is. You want to know which systems are the most important. Have this stuff in your plan and know how to activate it inside of it. Is there your cyber insurance provider's information in there? Do you know how to call them? Do you know what steps you have to do to make sure you're covered? Like that should be in your plan. That's important. How do you contact the FBI? How do you get help from CISA? Do you have other outside help that you bring in? Like, what are their numbers? Like, you may not have access to any of your systems. You may not even have access to this plan. So keep a hard copy of it printed out, right? That you can go and pull and read. There's just a lot of stuff around planning for this because you got to know it's going to happen at some point. Have a plan in place that you can at least respond to, and then pivot when you have to pivot. But just to have the beginnings of something to go to when the stuff hits the fan, right?
And I'm sure it was a phenomenal educational experience for you. And certainly you have to adjust the plan as you're going, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I outline in the book just different stuff that kept cropping up here and there over the course of a few weeks of recovery and forensic work and incident response work. I mean, we learned a whole lot around how to recover, what to look for, what breaks, what we didn't plan for, and then even how to communicate to internal stakeholders, communicate to external stakeholders, who's going to get to you first? Does the media get to you first with the story? You try to get to the media first before the story breaks, and just who you have to alert before that happens. Like, there's just so much that you don't think about from a tabletop standpoint. Again, until it's really in the action and you have to move then.
And I'm sure the process is almost like a decision tree, right? You try this, it doesn't work. You try this again, doesn't work. Then you kind of have to do something else, and kind of branches off into different things, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could, depending on the process, right? And the problems you've run into. Maybe you have your password stored in a key manager, but then that's on a server and that server's encrypted. Okay, well, how are you gonna get to your passwords now? Do you have a backup? All right, well, where's that backup at? I need to run it on a system. Do you have the license key? Like, your backup server is on a server. It's encrypted. All right, let's spin up a new one. Well, do we have the serial key? Oh no, I kept the serial key over here, and it's all right. Well, how do we get that? Do we need to reach out? There's so many things like that can spin off from that. So just really working through just a bunch of scenarios is your best course in prepping for those.
So how do you see AI changing cybersecurity in the next few years? Because it's taking place and it's happening, warp speed. I mean, exponential, the development just in the last 2 years. It's remarkable. I'm just curious what it's going to look like in 10 years, but how do you see that changing cybersecurity in the next few years?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on AI. I'm a big into AI right now. Use cases, driving efficiencies, trying to streamline some work. I think we're going to see it. I mean, we're already seeing it integrated in practically every product and platform that is coming out. I think for entry-level security folks, over the next few years, it's probably going to shake them up the most. From analyst work and log collection and review and triaging, first response, help desk tickets, and all that stuff. I think that entry level stuff is going to get really shooken up. I already know of some automated pen testing solutions out there that make pen testing a whole lot, I guess, more streamlined, a little easier, no human interaction really involved. And yeah, they can find 85% of the most common, vulnerabilities, unpatched systems, different ways to compromise and exploit systems. Maybe humans a little bit better, a little bit more fine tuned, but it's those wide ranging ones that get missed in configs and unpatched systems that are causing a lot of the breaches. So being able to speed that up and do continuous vulnerability scanning, I think, is really important. So once AI is layered in on that, it's actually agentic, I guess, and taking action for you and being like, oh, hey, these SMB shares are not protected. I'm going to go, change the settings here, or you're still using, LLNMR or whatever, all these old protocols or whatever. I'm not going to bore everyone with the tech speak, but to go out there and find these unsecure systems and protocols and just make action on your behalf. That's going to be huge. That's going to speed up and hopefully, make us a little bit more secure, make our systems better. We got to keep in mind, though, the threat actors are also figuring out ways to use AI too. So, I mean, at some point within the next 5 years, probably we're going to be seeing a lot of AI attacks and AI blocking, on both sides. So things are going to get faster. And if you're not using it, you're going to fall behind because the threat actors will be, and no human's going to be able to keep up with the way that AI is making the attack. So you're going to have your own or partner with someone who has their own, just to keep up with the back and forth that it's going to be. And that sounds dark, right? But I still think there's a lot of positives coming from AI, and I'm fully on board.
Yeah. If the obviously the president of your university probably is well aware of the vulnerabilities. If he was to call you up and gift your department some additional budget, where would you prioritize that in AI?
I might, but it probably wouldn't be on the security side of AI. It would probably just be on different sort of AI use cases and testing that we're doing. I run sort of a committee task force. I co-run it with another peer of mine, but we're meeting with departments and trying to figure out, all right, how do we implement AI here? I want to do it. I don't usually like to just spend money and force people to use tools, but I think once people can start seeing the efficiencies and the benefits gained from it, they start valuing it. And if I can free up some of their time, some of their energy, if we can, make their jobs a little easier, a little faster, then there's streamline effects all the way down the business. And that's really good. So we're meeting with departments regularly, talking with their users about what's your day-to-day task like, what repeat things are you doing. Here, let me show you what AI can do in a handful of areas. Now, can you take what you've learned from us and implement it in your day-to-day job with some of these repetitive tasks, maybe automate something? So we're doing all kinds of stuff there, just trying to ingrain it, teach people, educate. It's hard though in higher ed. I think at least a lot of the faculty side of the house are kind of scared of AI, a little bit leery of AI, and trying to alleviate those. And can students use it to cheat? Sure. But they can also use it to learn, to study. It is a tool, just like the calculator was, and they used to be scared of calculators back in the 80s. So we're just trying to normalize things, educate people, and use these cool new tools that are coming out on the market.
So on the flip side, if the university president comes to you and says he's cutting your budget, what do you fight for first?
That's great. A lot of end user support stuff. It's hard to say. So what we've done to prevent that specific instance is instead of doing a bunch of capital expenditures, big purchases here and there, we've really operationalized everything. Now that things are SaaS-based, cloud-based, we know what monthly costs are going to be each month. They're not variable; they're pretty fixed. So if he comes in and they're like, "Hey, we need to remove 5 or 10% of the budget," I can point and be like, "Well, I mean, that's going to be this system, or that's going to be this system, or that's going to be this." And I don't want to get into a point where I'm making that decision for the university as a whole, right? I'm a provider of services, and these are the services we have. And if you want to remove 10%, here's what we're going to lose. And then collectively, if we can decide, as from an enterprise risk perspective, from a leadership perspective, what we think is an acceptable risk to recoup budget, then absolutely, I'll pull that. But I don't want to be the one who has to make that decision. I think it needs to be a business level decision with all the stakeholders at the top involved. So I kind of keep that operational and let them pick what sort of service they don't want to have anymore.
Sure.
We want to do that play.
So we talked a little bit about this last week, and I know your job is extremely stressful, but you're a homesteader. So, and I know that's probably giving you a lot of relief when you get to walk away from the university. And I saw in your book where it said that, the cell signal's weak, and that's a good thing. So tell us about that lifestyle.
Yeah. So, again, I'm about 45 minutes or so outside the city. We live on a small plot of land out here surrounded by woods, which is pretty nice. I raise a bunch of chickens. We do a lot of gardening, a lot of self-sustainability. I collect rainwater and doing some solar power stuff and trying just to, make things simple. And it's funny. I think back to my childhood. I lived deep out in the country, like I mentioned earlier. And, it was simple then. I didn't necessarily always like it as a kid because we were like 25 minutes from the nearest town and I didn't have any friends nearby, and it was just open country, and we had play there, me and my sibling, my sister. And so it was just like play out there, find ways to entertain yourself. And now I come home and that's like what I look forward to. Like I don't want a lot of bells and whistles. I don't want a lot of noise. I just want to go out and hang out outside a little bit, tool around in the yard and do different projects. So I find a lot of joy and almost peace doing a lot of that stuff. So that's what I keep. I like walking in the woods or working in the garden or finding some project around the homestead, just to keep myself occupied on the weekends.
Well, that lifestyle is therapeutic, especially when you have a job like you do with this much responsibility.
Yeah, some days, maybe AI does take a dark turn and shuts us all down and I don't have to work anymore and I got to go back to farming to keep everyone fed. So, I guess there's always a fallback and there's a different piece to that, right, when the AI overlords take us. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I always try to be nice to ChatGPT because the day that it comes and turns on me, it goes, "Hey, Nick was a pretty nice guy," so it won't turn on us. We talked last week about an app. If you don't mind, I just want to see if you could tell us a little bit about the app, which I thought was intriguing.
Sure.
Tell us about the app that you built for your homestead, the chickens.
Yeah, so I combined my new found love of AI and homesteading together, and I think what the the kids call it this day are vibe coding, and I vibe coded my way through a mobile app, and which is pretty much just talking to an AI system in natural language, typing questions and having it build the code. But I actually worked with a couple different AIs over the course of less than a week, really just a few hours a night as we went through it to build an app that it's called Clucker, Cluckr, and it's actually in the Google Play Store as of this morning, which is very exciting.
Congratulations! That's great.
It's a chicken management app, and it lets me put in names of chickens and I breed information and egg collection, and there's a calculator in there to see how much you've saved over the life of raising chickens and collecting eggs from, as opposed to buying eggs in the store. And you can track the health and how much you feed and water them and all kinds of different stuff. I wanted an app that didn't need an internet connection once it's downloaded. It doesn't collect any information. Tried to be smart about the security on the back end of it, of how it's coded and what information is collected and stuff. But really a self-contained app that, I don't know, homesteaders, people who might be out in the sticks with weak internet connections can use and find a little value in. I just thought it was fun that we're literally in the age now where any application, any program you can think of, you can really just sit down in a few hours and build it and have very customized solutions just for you that fit whatever niche or need that you have. And it's just pretty awesome. And I have no coding experience whatsoever. And AI was able to code over 3,000 lines of code and sort of compile this and walk me through how to set it up and get it to the Play Store and create accounts and submit it and all this different stuff that I had no experience in whatsoever. And just talking to it, just asking questions now gets it done, which is pretty wild.
That's awesome. And you have plans, I guess, to get it in the Apple Store too on iOS, or?
I don't as of right now. I don't know if I will. If there's a need, if I get feedback that people want it, I might do it. But I'm an Android user, so I've selfishly built it for me and just put it out there for the other Androidians who might need it. But we'll see what happens down the road.
Is there anything from home that you've learned from homesteading that helps you in cybersecurity?
I think there's overlaps. I find a lot of peace in homesteading, so maybe not something I learned, but something that helps me stay focused and grounded. So when you have a busy, stressful day, you can come home and do something there, and it kind of helps you reset and get grounded a little bit, I think is important. But I see things where I maybe secured my chickens in a way where I build a coop and they have a run, which is a cage they can get out in. And then I built a bigger, cage around them. And I put in layers of fencing and I have dogs in it. And you sort of look at it and it's kind of like, oh, that's like a defense in depth sort of strategy. Oh, hey, these dogs are like, prevention, maybe like your EDR, and you got motion lights and those are detection systems. And you kind of put it all together and you're like, oh man, this functions just like a security system at work and how I would protect, critical data. But I've done it with physical objects in the real world. I wonder if that was like a subconscious thing or maybe it was always there and one was built off the other. But yeah, there's definitely parallels to that. I think, even in I talk about like water collection and using solar and then chickens, and there's a little bit of a prepper mindset there on how to be prepared and prepped. And that's no different than having a disaster recovery plan. I mean, when things go bad, you have a plan to stay functioning and stay operational. And I do the same thing on the homestead that I do on the work. So there's definitely some parallels and overlapping there.
Yeah, and I find myself doing the same thing, creating things in layers, and then also thinking, in failover, right? If this goes bad, how does it fail over? What's the backup? So I think about that a lot. What's the one security tool that you can't live without?
One security tool I can't live without. Man, that is a great question. I really like my my data classification tool right now. I've been in it for a couple of years, so I guess I'll give a quick plug. That's Concentric AI. That's really cool. I have an automated pen testing solution through Pintera. That's also pretty awesome. Those are pretty high. Enterprise browser. Island is pretty awesome too. I don't know. I'm plugging a lot of things, but I got a couple really, core 3 or 4 tools that I really, really like that I think make a pretty solid program that just gets you a lot of protection, a lot of good bang for your buck.
Island's headquartered here in Dallas.
Nice. Yeah, that's
they've been taking off.
Pretty sweet product.
Yeah. What's one book that you might recommend besides your own?
Marcus Aurelius's meditation, the OG of Stoicism, probably the most famous one. He was an emperor of Rome. The book Meditations was his journal of pretty much his day-to-day life. And I think it's interesting that literally at that time, probably the most powerful man in the world is writing in a journal. And a lot of his day-to-day problems and frustrations are the same ones that lowly people, peasant people like myself deal with on a day-to-day, from grumpy, mean, irritable people to, having problems getting up out of bed in the morning from his warm bed and having to get out in the cold and do stuff, or just the work that goes into it, or the frustrations of everything. Like, he dealt with the same thing, and just, again, trying to stay grounded and calm and deal with, life as it comes. And there's a lot of just good information there. So I reread that one almost every year, if not twice a year. Sometimes it travels with me. I have a version on my phone, but Meditations is a great book.
Despite being 2,000 years old, it's very applicable to today. And like you said, when it's cold and you don't want to get out of bed, just some simple things like that. It is very applicable to real life today. Yeah, no, absolutely. He didn't read it for anyone or write it for anyone specifically. He didn't think people were going to read it, and it's lasted this long, and it's one of the best. I read that if he found out people were reading that, he would be horrified.
Probably no one. You don't want anyone reading your personal journal, right? You want to keep that one private.
Somebody uncovered it and publicized it. Where's the best place for listeners to connect with you? LinkedIn, website?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place. I regularly post there, so I'm doing a lot of promotion around the book right now. So you'll see a lot of me right now on LinkedIn. I'm probably burning some people out, but you got to get used to it. So I'm all over LinkedIn. You can also find me on my website is the homesteadingciso.com. So you can go out to homesteadingciso.com. I post there. I have a few resources. Those are probably the biggest two. I'm very active in the St. Louis area. I tour all over the country giving speeches at conferences. So if you go to a lot of those, we'll probably run into each other at some point.
Certainly. I appreciate that. And I'll post your information into the description so people can access it when they see it. Yeah. So the book is called Locked Up. Zach Lewis. Get the book. I think it's going to be a great handbook for not only cybersecurity folks, but executives. I think the executive suite probably needs to read it, right?
Yeah, everyone needs to read it. Everyone should get a copy. It'll be out in January. Pre-order is now open on Amazon. You'll also be able to find it in Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, all the big retailers. So
I think I'm going to buy a couple extra copies and send them to a few CISOs here in Dallas. In my territory. I think that'd be a great gift, right?
It's a great gift, great idea. And if you guys have a copy and you want a signature, I will definitely sign that for you.
Maybe I'll buy a case of them. And
I like this is getting better by the moment, Nick. Just one book, several books, a case. I love it.
Well, I appreciate you joining the Build Your Empire podcast. This is a great story. I'm looking forward to getting a little more intimate in reading the book, and I think it'll be a learning experience for me. I'm on the sales side, but still I'm involved technically, but just understanding the process and how all of this developed. Because, like we said earlier, it could be a resume motivating event or a career ending event. And luckily you survived and were able now to tell a great story. And I think your story is going to be helpful to a lot of people, especially the cybersecurity community, in addition to people outside of cybersecurity. So thanks for joining today.
Yes, absolutely. No, thanks for the plug. Thanks for having me. Let's do it again sometime. It's been great. I appreciate it.
Certainly. Yeah. Maybe post release of the book. And, you said that you were going to be working on something for Stoicism too, correct?
Oh yeah, there's some stuff in the works. Let's not get too excited. It's a process, but yes, absolutely. We'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, we'll have you back for sure. So thank you very much for joining us here today, and look forward to the book coming out.
Awesome. Thank you very much. We'll talk later.
Thank you for tuning in to the Build Your Empire podcast. Producing the show takes time, money, and resources, and we deeply appreciate your support. Here are 3 simple ways you can help us keep this broadcast going strong. Number 1, visit our website at buildyourempirepodcast.com to join our email list. Stay updated on future episodes, exclusive content, and everything happening in the Build Your Empire community. Second, if you'd like to make a small donation to support the podcast, you can do so at buymeacoffee.com/ Build Your Empire podcast. Every contribution helps us continue to share inspiring stories and valuable insights. Thirdly, maintain the Build Your Empire mindset with some comfortable and stylish athleisure wear from czarclothing.com. Whether it's for you or a gift for someone you care about, you'll find apparel designed to empower you to build your empire. Use code ZAR25 for 15% off your shopping cart. And finally, if there's a specific guest or topic you'd like to see on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a line at nicholas@buildyourempirepodcast.com. That's NICHOLAS at buildyourempirepodcast.com. Thank you for being part of this journey. Together, let's keep building empires. We'll see you on our next podcast.